Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into raising mentally strong kids.
Mentally strong kids.
Yeah.
Those resilient, independent ones. The ones that can face a challenge head on.
Exactly. And we've got a great source to guide us, an interview with Dr. Daniel Amen on the JayShettyPodcast.
Dr. Amen, he's a child psychiatrist, right?
He is renowned, actually. He's worked with thousands of children and families over the years. And I'll tell you, he brings together neuroscience and practical parenting advice in a really interesting way.
So what's the big takeaway? What's the one thing we should all be doing?
Well, get this. One of the core ideas is that we actually want our kids to make mistakes.
Wait, what? Make mistakes? Don't we want to protect them from that?
I know, right? It sounds counterintuitive. But of course, we're talking about mistakes within reason. The point is that mistakes can be incredible learning opportunities, if we approach them the right way, that is.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we create that kind of environment where kids feel safe to, stumble and learn?
Well, Dr. Amen starts by emphasizing something really crucial. Parents need to model that mental strength themselves.
Right, lead by example. Like, you can't teach what you don't embody.
Exactly. He even shares a personal story about his own upbringing. His father wasn't really present.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it really highlights how important that presence and connection are in parenting. Just being there for your kids.
That makes me think of attachment theory, how important those loving bonds are right from the start.
Absolutely. And that brings us to one of Dr. Amen's suggestions. He calls it special time.
Special time, what's that?
It's about carving out 20 minutes each day just to connect with your child. No commands, no questions, no directions.
Wow, just being present.
Exactly. He actually tells this amazing story about his literary agent who was struggling to connect with his daughter. And they tried this special time thing. It totally transformed their relationship.
Really? That's incredible. I mean, it sounds so simple.
I know. It's all about making that effort to be present with our kids, like really listening to them.
Oh, that reminds me of something. Active listening.
Yes. It's so important. It's that thing where you repeat back what you hear, encouraging your child to really open up.
And maybe even solve their own problems.
Exactly. Dr. Amen gives this funny example about a kid who desperately wants blue hair.
Blue hair?
Yeah. And instead of just shutting down the conversation with a no, he suggests using active listening.
To figure out why they want blue hair.
Yeah. Maybe there's a deeper reason behind it.
Huh. I like that. Makes you think twice about just saying no right away.
Right. Okay, so we've got being present, active listening. What about boundaries?
Boundaries are important. Gotta have those.
Dr. Amen agrees. He's all about setting clear boundaries and rules, but in a loving and consistent way. He even shared something from a study at the University of Oregon that really surprised me.
Oh, what was that?
Well, it turns out loving and permissive parenting can actually lead to more mental health challenges for kids.
More than what?
Than hostile and firm parenting.
Whoa, really? That's unexpected.
I know, right? Blew my mind a little bit.
But I guess when you think about it, kids do need some structure, some boundaries.
That's what Dr. Amen says. It gives them a sense of security and predictability.
So it's finding that sweet spot, right? Between loving and supportive, but also firm.
Exactly. It's about providing that guidance they need to thrive.
Speaking of thriving, how do we build up their self-esteem?
Well, Dr. Amen actually links this to a really interesting Harvard study. They followed 454 kids for 70 years.
Wow, 70 years. That's a long time.
It is. And they found that the biggest factor for self-esteem was whether or not kids had responsibility and the opportunity to work, even from a young age.
So chores, helping out around the house, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Dr. Amen says those experiences help them develop a sense of agency and accomplishment.
Interesting. Thinking back, I did have chores growing up.
Me too.
Yeah.
And looking back, I think it really did give me a sense of independence and accomplishment.
It's like you're contributing. You're a valuable part of the family.
Absolutely. And this all ties back into that idea of letting kids make mistakes, right?
Because if we solve all their problems...
They never learn to do it themselves.
Exactly. And Dr. Amen tells this great story about his daughter, Chloe. She was struggling with homework, so his wife decided to stop doing it for her.
And what happened?
Chloe started taking responsibility, and she ended up doing really well academically.
It's so tempting to jump in and rescue them. But sometimes a little struggle is exactly what they need.
To build that resilience.
Exactly. Dr. Amen even has this rule about not bringing forgotten items to school for his kids.
Really?
Yeah. It might sound harsh, but it's actually brilliant.
I can see that. Natural consequences, they learn to be responsible.
Right. They learn to problem solve.
It all makes sense. But let's be real here. We're raising kids in a world full of technology and social media.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do we handle that? Well, Dr. Amen acknowledges the downsides, especially with social media. He says to delay that exposure as long as possible.
Good advice.
And when you do introduce it, set clear boundaries.
Because, let's face it, social media can be addictive.
It can. Dr. Amen actually talks about how it's designed that way.
And then real life seems boring in comparison.
Right. It's a little scary when you think about it.
Okay, so boundaries. But what does that look like in real life? How do we actually do that?
Well, first of all, we need to model healthy tech habits ourselves.
Right. Lead by example. Again.
Exactly. We can create tech-free zones in our homes, set screen time limits, things like that.
And encourage other activities, right? Things that get them interacting in the real world.
Yes. Family dinners without phones, trips to the park, board games.
It's about being intentional, creating those opportunities for connection, real connection.
That's what it's all about. And we can also talk to our kids about the downsides of too much technology.
Help them develop those critical thinking skills.
Exactly. So they can make informed choices.
This is all great advice. But we all know parenting isn't always smooth sailing. What about when we mess up?
That's a great point. We all make mistakes. So how do we repair those and get back on track? We'll be discussing that in the next part of our deep dive.
So about those mistakes we make as parents.
Yeah, we were talking about that. It's inevitable, right? We're going to mess up sometimes.
Definitely. And Dr. Amen actually talks about this thing he calls the guilt cycle.
The guilt cycle.
Yeah, it's like we overreact to something our kid does, and then we feel guilty, so we overcompensate.
By being too lenient.
Exactly. And then that just leads to more behavioral issues.
And the cycle starts all over again.
Yep. It's a trap.
I've totally been there.
Yeah.
So how do we break free from this guilt cycle?
Well, Dr. Amen's advice is pretty simple. He says, every day I win or I learn.
I like that.
It's about shifting our perspective, right? Instead of beating ourselves up over every mistake.
We see it as a learning opportunity.
Exactly. And modeling that self-compassion for our kids.
Showing them that it's okay to mess up.
Yeah, as long as we learn from it.
Makes sense. It takes the pressure off trying to be perfect.
Which, let's face it, none of us are. And speaking of focusing on the positive, Dr. Amen shares this really heartwarming story.
Oh, what's that?
He calls it his penguin story. It really illustrates the power of noticing and appreciating the good things about our children.
The penguin story. Okay, you got to tell me more.
So he's giving this lecture on, noticing the positive. And afterward, a woman comes up to him, tears in her eyes.
Wow.
And she shares that her son's been struggling. And all she can see are his flaws. It's affecting their relationship.
That's so tough.
It is. But after hearing Dr. Amen speak, she decides to try something different.
What does she do?
Every day, she committed to finding one thing she genuinely liked about her son.
Just one thing.
Just one thing. And she would tell him.
Oh, wow. I love that.
It's powerful, right? And you know what? It made a huge difference.
Well,
yeah, his behavior improved and their relationship was transformed just from shifting her focus to what she appreciated about him.
it's amazing how much our words and attention can impact our kids.
It really is. And it all comes back to that idea of mentally strong parents raise mentally strong kids. It starts with us.
Our mindset, how we handle challenges.
To treat ourselves and others.
Okay, so practical tips. What can we actually do to put these ideas into action?
Well, we talked about special time, right?
Yeah, that 20 minutes a day.
Exactly. Just being present with your child.
Sounds simple, but it can be hard to actually make that time.
I know it takes effort, but think of it as an investment.
In your child's emotional well-being.
Exactly. And remember Dr. Amen's emphasis on setting boundaries.
Right, that balance between love and limits.
He actually uses a great analogy. Imagine you're teaching your child to bowl.
Okay.
When they're first starting out, you put up the bumpers.
To prevent those gutter balls.
Right. But as they get better, you gradually take those bumpers away.
So they can develop their skills.
And their confidence.
I love that analogy. So it's like we're providing support and guidance.
But also giving them space to make their own choices.
Even if those choices lead to mistakes.
Exactly. Which, as we talked about, can be valuable learning opportunities.
It's about letting go of that need to control everything.
Yeah.
Trusting them.
And, another interesting point Dr. Amen makes is about praising effort over intelligence.
Oh, what do you mean?
He says, never tell a child they're smart. Instead, focus on acknowledging their hard work.
I wouldn't have thought of that. Why not praise their intelligence if they are bright?
Well, he explains that when we praise intelligence as a fixed trait, kids might be afraid to try challenging things.
For fear of looking not smart if they fail.
Exactly. But when we praise their effort,
We're encouraging that growth mindset.
right, they learn that their abilities can grow and develop.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. And it all ties back to those core values we've been talking about: responsibility, resilience, growth mindset.
And of course, connection and open communication.
Remember active listening?
Yeah. That example with the blue hair,
It's about creating that safe space where kids feel comfortable sharing anything.
even if it seems irrational or strange to us.
Because sometimes those out there requests are masking something deeper.
Needs, insecurities.
Right. We got to listen with empathy, try to understand the emotions behind the words.
Okay, this is all great, but let's be real. We're all busy. How do we find the time and energy for all of this?
That's where special time comes in again.
Yeah.
Even just 20 minutes, it can make a world of difference.
He makes it sound so doable. But what if our kids resist? What if they'd rather be on their screens?
Well, that's where those boundaries around technology come in.
Right, limiting screen time.
And being good role models ourselves. If we're always on our phone.
They're going to want to be too.
Exactly. So tech-free zones, screen time limits.
And lots of real-world activities. Family dinners, outings, board games.
Being intentional about creating those opportunities for connection.
I love it. This is all fantastic for everyday challenges, but what about the big ones?
Yeah.
Like divorce or dealing with mental health issues in the family?
Those are important questions, and we'll be delving into those next. So those big challenges, like divorce, how do we help our kids through that?
It's such a tough situation for everyone involved.
It is, and Dr. Amen really stresses open and honest communication.
Makes sense. Keep the kids informed.
Yeah, but he also cautions against bad-mouthing the other parent.
Oh, right. Even if you're angry or hurt.
Exactly, because remember, kids see themselves as half of each parent.
So when you criticize one parent,
You're criticizing part of the child.
wow, that's powerful. It's about putting their well-being first.
Always. And when it comes to mental health issues, Dr. Amen's big thing is seeking professional help.
If you need it,
Right. He emphasizes that the brain is an organ.
just like any other organ.
Exactly. And sometimes it needs medical attention.
It's like if you had heart disease or diabetes, you wouldn't hesitate to get treatment.
Right. So why should mental health be any different?
It's about breaking down that stigma.
And recognizing that it's just as important as physical health.
And that seeking help doesn't mean we've failed as parents.
It means we're doing everything we can to support our kids.
Love that.
Uh,
It's about getting them the help they need to thrive.
exactly. And Dr. Amen actually brings up something that a lot of child psychiatrists don't.
Oh.
He talks about the spiritual side of raising kids.
So not just mental strength, but also their inner world.
Yes. Nurturing their sense of meaning and purpose.
Interesting. How does he suggest we do that?
He talks about helping them find their passions.
What they're really interested in.
Yeah. Their values, their unique gifts, what they want to contribute to the world.
It's about encouraging them to be their authentic selves.
Exactly. To find their own path.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. We've covered so much.
We have mental strength, boundaries, mistakes, growth mindset, connection.
Meaning and purpose, those big life challenges.
It's a lot, but remember, we don't have to be perfect.
Win or learn, right.
Right. It's about progress, not perfection, getting ourselves grace.
I love that. But before we wrap up, I think there's one more important point from Dr. Amen.
Oh, you mean that question he leaves us with?
Yes. He challenges us to think about what one small change we can make today.
To foster our child's mental strength.
Exactly. What's that one thing you can do differently?
Maybe it's that 20 minutes of special time.
Maybe it's noticing your child doing something right and telling them how much you appreciate it.
Or maybe it's just taking a deep breath.
Choosing to respond with kindness, even when it's tough.
Whatever that small change is, take that step.
Because even those little things can make a difference.
They can create a more positive environment for your child to thrive.
I am so inspired to put all of this into practice. What about you?
Absolutely. And if you want to learn more, Dr. Amen's book, Raising Mentally Strong Kids, is a great resource.
We'll be sure to link to that in the show notes. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.
See you on our next deep dive adventure.